So,
Okay.
welcome, Jeffrey,
Thank
to
you.
this conversation about co-creating the third attractor.
Okay.
And my first question is always, are you familiar with the term the third attractor?
Well, again, no, vaguely, but I'm not sure what you mean by it. So maybe you can
Okay,
define it.
yes,
Mhm.
sure, no problem. I got the term from Daniel Schmachtenberger, who has put out two YouTube videos about the third attractor like 3, 4 years ago. And what he means by it, and that's what I kind of how I use it, is that our world seems to go into two directions right now, either authoritarianism or
Mhm.
chaos, or
Right.
anarchy.
I see.
And he was making the point, it would be good if you would find a third attractor that is more positive, more sustainable, more regenerative, more beautiful, more conscious.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the core question I try to answer with my conversation about co-creating the third attractor is how do we create this better world? How do we create this uh, different way of living together? How do we create this third attractor? Is it even possible to create a third attractor? Many of my conversation partners have said you actually can't create anything. It has to emerge from the life circumstances. So probably let's start with this question. Do you think we can actively steer the world in a better direction, in a more hopeful direction, in a more sustainable, regenerative direction?
Um, I mean, clearly, I'm an optimist. I mean, that's why I'm in higher education because I mean, let me back up. Let me
Hmm.
first of all, the third attractor, it's an old expression. Tertium quid is what the 19th century intellectuals called it, the third thing.
Mm,
And it was there it was this there was this scientific materialism or this skepticism or this sort of horizontalism, and there was this spiritual or psychical or mystical verticality. And the third thing was let's not go to reason reason and science, but let's also not go to traditional religious belief.
I see. Yep.
Let's do something that's more plausible and more meaningful and more thinkable and imaginable in the modern world. So
Hmm.
that was the tertium quid 140 years ago.
Mm,
So this idea of the third attractor is I think a version of that, but I think it's probably been more precisely theorized in that history. Um, to answer your question, one of my I tell a lot of jokes because I think they encapsulate ideas that people
hmm.
can remember. And one of my jokes is that if you turn your TV on, all of the sci-fi visions of the future they're all
Yep.
dystopias. And I'm not a utopian in that I think everything will be grand and beautiful, but I think we should be imagining a better future. And at the end of the day, I think I'm probably an idealist in the philosophical sense. If we imagine, and by we, I mean a very broad we, if we imagine a future that's bad, we'll likely produce a future that's bad. And if we imagine a future that's more positive, we'll likely get a future that's more positive. So I think
Hmm.
there's something powerful. And I also know as a historian of religions that all religious and cultural movements start out as tiny little movements, usually around a
Hmm.
charismatic individual. And then they grow for a lot of different reasons, or they don't, or they disappear.
Hmm.
Most religious movements don't last past a few generations, but some do. And so I have a lot of hope in individual creativity and in people thinking up new scenarios and new futures. And so yes, I mean the answer is yes. I think we have reason for optimism, and ultimately I think we should be optimistic because I think reality itself is optimistic. I think
Hmm.
it's about what is real and not about what is not real.
Hmm. And how would you, if you would think about this utopian civilization 500 years from now, what are the ingredients, or where do you think we need to fundamentally change our ways to steer into a utopian future that is sustainable
Well,
and we can survive in, no?
well, again, I'm not a utopian thinker per se. I mean, there are real problems with utopias too. Um, but my personal feeling is that a positive future is one in which there are very few boundaries and that human beings recognize that they're basically the same, and that cultures and communities and traditions essentially loosen up. They don't go away, but they recognize that they're part of the same human family or the same species, and we live on the same planet. Um, so that would be, I mean, that sounds idealistic. I mean, in a moral sense, but
Hmm.
I think that is precisely the future that we need to imagine. And it's very, I don't want to say that that's not neutral. You know, that it's very critical of most of our religious and political systems, which are, I think, highly exclusive, and by which I mean they exclude people. They imagine human beings as somehow fundamentally different, and they're not. They're not.
And I hear you also point to the underlying oneness that we can re-embrace and really make conscious more and more. Because if we would live our lives based on that oneness that is deep down in many of the religions, and especially here in India, very present, then there is this connectedness that naturally arises, no? And
Well,
that,
yeah, and of course I've been deeply influenced by India, but also by the whole history of religions. And you know, one of my other jokes is like, where exactly does non-duality end? Does it end in Afghanistan? Does it end in East Germany?
uh,
Does it end in Turkey? Of course, it doesn't end anywhere. If you think reality is non-dual, then you think reality is non-dual. Or if you think there is no self, if you want to speak in terms of Buddhism, I don't have a self either. You know, I mean, it's Buddhism isn't Nepal, isn't China, isn't South Korea. It's everywhere. You know, so
yeah, yeah.
these statements are universal global arguments. These are not local specific arguments. And the same with God, by the way. If there's a God, there's a God, and that God is everywhere and for everyone. It's not local. It's not for a particular people or a particular Middle Eastern culture.
Yeah, yeah, no, exactly. But it also means when you know that reality as a deep knowing, that changes your relationship to reality. No?
You would think so. You would
You
hope
would think
so.
so.
Now, historically, it doesn't. I mean, cultures that um, posit some kind of deeper unity are not not good cultures in terms of this exclusivity. I mean, they really there are social marginalities. There are deep ways to exclude people, even in
Hmm.
systems that so I this has been an obsession of mine for 30 or 40 years. Is like it actually doesn't translate, you know, socially or politically in any kind of automatic way. It could. I hear you. It makes total sense, but it actually doesn't play out historically, or it has not yet.
Yeah, no, and that's frustrating, isn't it? It's literally frustrating. But where I know you have grappled with the question for so long. Where do you see the obstacles? Why does it not translate? What is your conclusion why it doesn't translate?
I think human beings are essentially exclusive, and we. I think human beings they want to live in they want high walls and they want to exclude other people and they want borders and I think human beings historically, I mean, if we look back hundreds of thousands of years, you know, we certainly have migrated and we have traveled, but we have also settled and excluded and gone to war with each other. And we've done both of those things, and they're deep in our histories. I don't want to say in our DNA or in our genetics because I'm not convinced of that, but that exclusion is deeply human,
Hmm.
just like this inclusion is deeply human too. I think we've traveled and we've seen that it's all one, but we've also excluded each other and gone to war with the community in the next valley over. I mean, come on, that's what we've done for
Yeah, yeah,
hundreds of thousands
exactly.
of years. So I I think we need to wrestle with that and accept that. And I mean, the U.S. is a perfect example of that. American history is a horror show, you know, and it's also a glorious combination of things. It's a both and. It's not an either or.
Hmm.
Um,
Daniel Schmachtenberger in his original talk says something very similar as you just said. He says human beings are fundamentally rivalrous, and as long or as we are rivalrous, we will always try to be better than the other one, and that's kind of the same as creating the walls. We want to be distinct, no?
so what really puzzles me, just as an American now, this culture, by which I mean American culture, produces academics, produces people who don't see boundaries or don't see exclusions, but it also produces the institutions that rely on boundaries and rely on
Hmm.
things. So it produces both the exclusion and the inclusion. And of course, I exist in an institution that also excludes. I want to recognize that, you know, it's not it's there are no cultural institutions in where anything goes and everybody's welcome. It does they don't exist.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm also an athletic fan. I watch a lot of sports. Well, sports rely on people winning and losing. I mean, it's not equal. It's just
Hmm.
not. It relies on skill and a particular kind of exceptionalism that at least in the States we certainly celebrate.
Hmm.
But I think it's celebrated everywhere, that kind of exceptionalism in different forms,
Yeah.
of course.
No, I agree. But that being said, where is our way out or up or beyond? What do you see as the biggest obstacles right now, and
Well,
what are the solutions?
I think the biggest obstacles right now are a kind of suppression of free thinking and I mean really free thinking. I mean thinking outside any kind of social boundaries, any kind of religious or philosophical boundaries. And I think what's happening globally is there's a kind of attempt to sort of put the squash on that kind of conversation. And by thinking,
Hmm.
I don't mean academics. I don't mean people
Hmm.
in universities like myself. I mean everywhere. I mean an absolutely free communication and free conversation. And I do think you know, the internet, take the internet. It's an example of it's a kind of freewheeling communication device, but it also is run by a set of algorithms and so it contains and controls us as well as it allows us to communicate. I mean, it's allowing this conversation to happen. But if you go online or you Google or you do something, I mean, it's going to take you to a particular kind of message. And I don't think there's some kind of committee sitting around determining that. I don't. I'm not blaming anyone. I'm just saying
Yeah, yeah.
this is a this is a real issue.
Yes, it is. And I also wonder when you mentioned the free thinking. there is a lot of free thinking going on the internet that is also not helpful. Like,
No.
free thinking can mean all kind of things, also very crazy things. And
But let's talk.
and
Let's
and
talk about that. Let's talk. Let's go. I mean, I don't mean you and me. I don't mean now.
yeah,
But
yeah, yeah,
I think we should be addressing that thinking, the crazy thinking, openly and talking about. I'll just give you an example. I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. So I work with people's impossible experiences or anomalous experiences, things like
hmm
near-death experiences and precognitive dreams and abduction experiences. And the overwhelming sense I get from experiencers is one of suppression
yeah,
and censorship. They will not and cannot talk about these things openly, even with their loved ones often, certainly with their doctors and with their psychologists. They can't because they will be called crazy. They will be pathologized, or in a previous year they'll be criminalized, or if they're in a religious context, they'll be demonized. I
yeah,
mean, there are costs to talking about these kinds of experiences, social costs. And if you're a scientist, it's even more severe. You won't get the grant, or you won't get promoted, or I mean, there are severe professional disciplinary measures in place. Or if you're a politician, or if you're a leader you just can't do it. And
hmm
and so there's a whole realm of humanity that gets cut off and that gets pushed down. And that's this third attractor. I think most human beings are actually in this third space. They don't want the rational explanation, but they don't want the religious belief either. They want to be able to
yeah.
talk openly about the impossible experience. And ultimately, impossibility is a function of our social system. It's not a function of reality.
hmm
It's what we're told. It's not what is. And frankly, the religious traditions are just as bad often.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
they they want to tell you what will happen and what's good and what's bad and what's a demon and what's I mean, come on. I mean, that's not helpful.
Yeah, yeah. But don't you think that with the internet and all the social media and everything, there are platforms or areas where these like-minded people or people that have this experience can come together and exchange. But this then also creates kind of these bubbles. I feel like we live in a world that is full of bubbles where people meet with kind of different opinions about
Yeah,
reality,
of
but
course.
there is not enough permanence
Yeah. There's
permeating
not
between the bubbles. Yeah,
Well, again, that's why I really do believe in education. I think we should be integrating these experiences and these truth claims right into our educational system, to how we
yeah,
educate everybody, not just some people, and that will get us beyond the silos or the bubbles, as you're calling them. But we don't have that. We just don't have that. And there are certain things, at least in the States, you cannot say in a high school classroom.
yeah.
There are fewer things. There are fewer things you cannot say in a college or a university classroom because of the age limitation the legality that we draw at 18. But that's arbitrary, I think.
hmm
Um, but I'm shocked by how little we get pushback from parents, for example, in college, but you would get serious pushback in high school, at least
mm,
here.
mm,
And I'm sure it's because of that 18 rule. I'm positive.
really.
Oh yeah, it is. It's because there's also something in American culture that respects and honors free conversation in a college classroom, but does not actually want it in a high school or in a before college experience.
Yeah, yeah. So, but coming back to the obstacles and the solutions, free thinking is one thing. Do you believe that if we were allowed to free think, that people inherently have a sense for
I do.
how a better world would look like, that
I do.
if they could freely think
I do.
and express themselves?
I do, and that is my assumption. I get that, but I think it's the philosophical position of a lot of people. I think human beings are basically good, and if you let them be, they will generally be good. They won't always be good, but generally, yes, most people will be good. And I do have a lot of faith in human beings, and I have a lot of faith in thinking if you really let it be free. If you control it, I don't have as much faith in it.
I am not as confident as you are. I feel human beings also are inherently selfish
Yeah,
and like better to take than to give, for
yeah,
example.
yeah. I mean, I get into this conversation constantly. So
Yeah,
I have been on page at least much more aligned with your view than the view I just articulated. But I mean, ultimately, you have to decide whether the universe is good or bad. I mean, to speak philosophically, you don't have to do anything, but I think you ultimately take a position whether you think reality is ultimately good or bad for humans now. And good and bad, I mean, is a relative term in terms of the species. And I really do think ultimate reality is good. But I don't think, again, I'm with you. I don't think human beings' experience of ultimate reality
yeah.
is always translatable into social terms as good.
No, I agree with that. I do think that the creative impulse, the universe, the deepest part that drives the universe is ultimately good. And it's a big yes. Andrew always said it's a big yes.
Well, there you go. That's and so
Yeah,
the question is will reality ultimately win out or will it not? And I think that's the question. And I think ultimately it will win out, but how long that takes and how often we mess things up and we kill each other, um, I think that's pretty bad. That's pretty obvious.
yeah. And does it turn out well for humanity? Or, I mean, it, just because the universe is good doesn't mean that human beings are meant to survive this whole mess, no?
It doesn't. It doesn't. But
Yeah,
I think most of us work with some kind of human-centric or anthropocentric model of the universe, whether we admit it or not. And I know there are people who don't, but
yeah.
um, it's hard to get around that because of our own natures.
Yes, but I do also think that it would be good to get a little less anthropocentric and become a little more aware of that we are just part of this whole process and also part of nature, no? I think
Yeah,
one of the big challenges we have on in the world is that human beings feel superior to everything else and
yeah,
act like this, no?
yeah, absolutely.
So where do you see we can act towards a better future?
So
What?
I'm terrible at that question. I mean, I'm a nerd. You know, I can talk about this or that problem with this or that system, but when it comes to acting or leading, I'm terrible. I'm not that. But that's a kind of confession or a kind of a recognition of what I can do and what I can't do. I mean, I'm an educator, so
Yeah,
I can sit with young people and I can tell them where this will go or where that will go or what this idea means or what that idea means. But I'm not a religious leader. I'm not a political leader. I'm just not.
yeah,
And
yeah. No, I understand that. But okay, let me rephrase. Do you have a philosophically based idea what would need to change for the whole of humanity and the world going in a different direction? Like deeply philosophical.
I do.
Where
Of course I do. Of course. I mean, I talk about that all the time in the classroom and I write about it all the time. And I mean, the way to sort of summarize that, I think human beings need to be far more comparative. You know, we need to recognize that we're all the same and that we're all
Hmm.
different.
Hmm.
And we need to be able to balance that sameness and difference in ways that we have not done yet. We simply have not done it.
Hmm.
And that has political consequences and moral consequences and religious consequences. And I don't think most people are up to it, frankly.
Yeah.
Um, um, but I think it's obvious that's where we need to go. And so, you know, to kind of give you a, you know, a really funny, blunt example, you know, the question, would you baptize an alien? Okay, that is a comparative question. And my answer is no, don't do that. That's silly. It's a silly question, but it makes a lot of sense if you inhabit a particular worldview, you know?
Mm.
And
Hmm.
so I want us to like think about the world and the universe in fundamentally different ways. And this gets to the non-anthropocentric thing that you were talking about earlier.
Hmm.
You know, the alien in our imagination, it looks very human to me, you know, but it's probably not, or they're probably not. And so it get and that's before we get to Buddhists and Hindus and Christians and Muslims. And I'm like, my God, this is so simple in some ways. You know, we're all the same and we're all very different. And it doesn't do any good to say all the religions are the same because they're not. But it doesn't do any good to say they're all completely different either because they're not. It's obvious that they're both.
Hmm.
And we have not developed a way of integrating that into our cultures and into our communities.
Hmm.
We keep imagining that my community or my religion or my culture is somehow special or different than all the rest.
Yeah, then it all boils down also to fundamentally different value sets living on this globe at the same time. I often think probably it's the first time in history that so many different sets of values, religious, scientific, modernity, postmodernity, post-postmodernity, and they all kind of should live together, but they have fundamentally different values that they orient
Yeah,
themselves.
yeah, yeah. Another way to say what I'm trying to say is comparison is justice. If you can recognize the similarity of the other, but also
Hmm.
the difference of the other, and honor both the sameness and the difference, you will create a just world. But if you cannot do that, if you cannot recognize the difference in the sameness, you're going to create an unjust world. You're going to oppress people. You're not going to do that. And
Hmm.
so that's really my most philosophical way of saying that is we need to become much more comparative and one. If I guess you can put that, but the one is also a plurality. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
we have to recognize the manyness and the oneness.
Yeah, and what about insight is a recognition of the manyness and the oneness. I hear you say we have to see our differences, and I totally agree. And the oneness. What about verticality inside of this view,
Well,
or
so
hierarchy of values, or is
I know. So we have to talk about that.
yes?
I mean, this is the issue. So I do not think all human beings are the same, you know, in our abilities. Obviously, I
Hmm.
don't.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and some some people are just different. There's this verticality. They just they just experience more things than the rest of us. The rest
Hmm.
of us are kind of more horizontal and we're kind of spiritual duds, as I joke. I mean, I certainly am. But I
Hmm.
have been around truly charismatic people. They clearly are tuned in to some kind of verticality that I am not. I'm a much more
Hmm.
horizontal kind of guy. Um, and I think we have to recognize that. But that recognition is part of this comparison that I'm trying to
Hmm.
articulate. And there are many of those charismatic individuals, not one.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
There,
Yeah.
there are actually there have been thousands of them in the history of religions that we know about, and there's probably been millions. There are probably millions today. And
Yeah.
we keep we create these cultures that are monotone and we crush anomalous or impossible experiences down, and then we say, oh, they're really rare and they're
Hmm.
no, they're not. They're not
Hmm.
rare. They happen all the time to all kinds of people, and that but those people will not talk
Hmm.
because we've created these cultures and these communities that suppress them essentially.
Hmm.
So I guess what I'm trying to argue for human beings, and I'm trying to say if we really recognized the full spectrum of our humanity, we would recognize how fundamentally different we all are, but also how fundamentally similar we all are.
Yeah.
And again, that sounds a bit idealistic, but that's actually what I really think, and that's really kind of behind really it is behind all of this teaching and all of this writing.
But that would also mean that people in general would need to be not so identified with who they think they are. No, I mean, it's a very spiritual position that you are describing.
Yeah.
The less we are identified with our small selves or the conditioned selves or nationality or religion or you name it.
Ethnicity
Exactly.
or skin color or
Yeah.
sexual orientation, or you could just go
Yeah.
on with the
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
identities. And yeah, so what I'm trying to articulate, it's not neutral. It's not, and
Hmm.
it's aimed at the heart of most religious identities, by the way, which I think are nonsense. I think are fictional at the end of the day. But they're very effective socially. I get that. I really get how
Hmm.
that they're effective socially, but our societies are not good.
Hmm. So to add to that complexity, now AI comes into play, no?
Right.
Well, let's talk about AI and what do you
Okay.
think about it? Philosophically, humanly, as a tool, as an entity, as conscious, not conscious.
First of
What
all,
are your thoughts?
it's not conscious.
Yeah, I agree.
It's not intelligent. And also it's us. It's us.
Yeah. Yes.
Um, and AI is a tool, and we should engage it, but we should never confuse intelligence with AI.
Yeah.
You know, um, so I personally think AI, first of all, I deal with it all the time as an educator. I mean, this isn't a naive question, a naive answer. I
Yeah.
think students use AI and um, they should, but we should also recognize that there are really unique forms of critical thinking and reflexivity that are unique to the human being and are really not possible in an AI environment, even if we can be tricked. Even if it
Yeah.
can mimic these things, that doesn't mean it's not truly reflexive. It's not truly conscious. It's not truly intelligent. It's mimicking for sure. It's faking a lot of people. I get that.
Hmm.
But um, it's not intelligent or conscious. But
Yeah.
again, that doesn't mean we shouldn't use it. Or we shouldn't use it as a tool. Of course we should. It's just like the internet. It's just like
Yeah.
printing.
Yeah.
It's like saying the printing press should have never happened. Or, the automobile or the train, or I mean it's pointless. It's like, why are you arguing that? I mean, of course it happened, and now we're going to deal with the consequences and the benefits and the problems
So I agree with you totally. I have exactly the same view. But I do see a lot of people talking totally differently about AI and kind of claiming either it is already on the brink of becoming conscious or it will soon.
But they're just
Um,
wrong. They're just wrong. And I'm happy saying that. And I think that's the
yeah,
conversation we should have. This is what I mean
yeah,
about free speak. You're
yeah.
wrong. That's just wrong. And here's why it's wrong. And then you give reasons. It's not just you state a position, it's that you
Hmm.
state reasons for your position. Um, and again, I think that's pretty easy to show. Um,
And how would you make the argument? I want to play the devil's advocate here for a moment because I know you might have good arguments. Some people say it's not clear that consciousness needs a biological body. It could be a silicon body, and consciousness could still use the silicon body to
well,
manifest itself in the world.
that's a form of dualism. Right? That's definitely a form of dualism. And again, so let's call it dualism, and let's talk about that, you know? Um, the way that AI is usually talked about is through something called the Turing test. And you have a computer in the other room
Mm,
and you can't tell if it's a human or a computer. Well, it's a form of mimicry. It's a form of faking it, essentially. And so I'm not persuaded by the Turing test at all. And
no.
but a lot of people are. And the argument
Even
is,
now, because I have heard many people say that the Turing test is kind of done already, and AI passed it and doesn't prove anything. That doesn't really. It just proves it can mimic
well, that's what I think.
answers.
I just
Yeah,
think I think
exactly.
it does, it can mimic consciousness. I get
Yeah.
that. But so what? Again, that's us. That's us. And what I'm trying to argue is that what we need to do as human beings is take back our projections. We need to understand that it's us. And we're constantly worshiping the god or talking about a demon or now it's AI or whatever it is. We're constantly putting our responsibility outside of ourselves. We're projecting it into the sky, or we're projecting it into a religious entity, or we're projecting it into a computer or into a computer
Hmm.
system. I'm like, stop it. Just stop it. Just don't do that. And that doesn't mean you don't use the AI, or you don't, you can even use the religion, I suppose, but don't ever imagine that you're not it, because you are it. Yeah.
Hmm.
And I'll just give you a simple example. So I talk to a lot of editors at university presses, and I watch, of course, I watch my students, and there's a kind of collapse today of the art of reading, I would say.
Hmm.
People don't read. And And I mean that in a spiritual as well as an intellectual sense. Reading is transformative. Their transmission can happen during a reading for some reason that we don't understand.
Hmm.
But it won't happen if there's no reading.
Yeah.
And and also reading is not reading comprehension. Let me put it in terms of an educator.
Hmm. Hmm.
You can put a paragraph in front of a student, and the student can read the paragraph just fine and not have a clue
Hmm.
how to articulate the argument.
Hmm.
Not a clue.
Hmm.
So it's reading and reading comprehension are two different things. And that comprehension and that reflexivity is really what I'm trying to articulate here, is that ability to step back and not think your thoughts, not even think your thoughts, not
Yeah.
even believe your beliefs, but to step back and understand that you're thinking those thoughts and you're believing those beliefs. That's really hard for people. And it's not possible, by the way, for a lot of people. I've seen that in the classroom. It's simply not possible. But
Yeah. And probably.
it's possible for some people, but not for everyone.
And it seems to be less and less possible now because of the not reading whole books, because of everything has to be kind of shortened down to these little snippets of information instead of like a wealth of information as comes out of a book and
Well,
can actually transform yourself.
I'll just tell you as an educator again, someone who spends a lot of time in the classroom, it's hard to talk to students when they're doing this on their cell
I
phone or
can
when they're on
imagine.
or they're looking at a screen. You actually cannot communicate with them. You cannot
Mhm,
talk to them. And the digital world just it just scatters people in a
mhm,
thousand directions, literally a thousand directions sometimes. And it's devastating. It's devastating to sitting with a human being and having a conversation about some really important question.
mhm. And are there any initiative signs that this is going to change soon?
Shut the screen, turn off the phone, sit with the teacher and just listen and
Yeah, yeah, no,
talk
that I
and
understand. But
read.
do you see movements in that direction?
Yeah, I do actually. I mean,
You do.
I do see that. I mean, like when I walk into a bank, it'll say things like shut your cell phone off, or you walk into a theater and it'll say shut yourself. I'm like, turn your cell phone off. I'm like, okay, all right. At least we're gonna
Yeah.
like, that's something. Um, but here at my university, like I'll just, speak personally. This is about 15 years ago. I was chairing at our department, and I was in this big meeting that was all the chairs in the university, and we were meeting with our provost. And the provost asks us, "Well, what is our biggest problem?" And I just popped up. I said, "Oh, that's easy. It's email." And everybody laughed at me. And I was like, "No, it's that's the problem. If you want to know what I do most of the day, it's freaking email.
Mm,
And it's even worse now.
yeah, yeah.
So in some ways, I see it going in the opposite direction, getting worse. But in other ways, I do see signs of it. People like in slow email cultures, and again, I said banks or classrooms. I mean, or you see whole high schools now confiscating cell phones at the beginning of the day and then
Yeah, yeah.
releasing them at the end of the day. That to me is a really hopeful sign because educators know darn well that if you allow students to have digital media, they will use it.
Hmm.
And it's a problem. It distracts and disables the learning process. We know
Yeah.
that. We know that as educators. And people ironically, it's funny, ironically, people who produce this software and this hardware, they don't allow their kids generally to have
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
they know darn
Yeah,
well how it affects human beings. It's not good. It's
yeah.
bad. Um, and again, it's not to say we shouldn't use it or we shouldn't have it, but it's a matter of when and
Hmm.
how.
What else is happening in the classrooms? What
I
are
oh,
the young people grappling with? What is
mhm.
difficult for them?
I again, I'm an old guy. I'm a fuddy-duddy, as I joke. I feel older every fall. My joke is, and of course I am in relationship to the students. I the main the main response I get from certainly undergraduates is apathy, frankly.
Mm. Oh,
And
wow.
I worry a lot about that. But I also think that they're afraid. And I think most of all, they're afraid of each other. Um,
Mhm.
they're not afraid of me, I don't think, but they are afraid of each other and appearing on some social media site or being canceled or taking a position that isn't a popular one, or they're afraid. And
Mhm.
so it's very hard to get them to articulate their worldview because they won't do it. They won't do it in public in
Mhm.
class. They'll often do it with me privately, but they won't do it with their peers in general. And that's again not their fault. I'm not
Yeah, yeah.
blame, but I see that as a broad cultural and educational problem or challenge, particularly when you're talking about religion or philosophy or worldview. These are the very things you want to talk about in a
Hmm.
classroom, and
Yeah, yeah.
you just can't.
But what is the spiritual grounding or the religious grounding of the majority of the people, the young?
Certainly at my institution, it's mostly STEM. It's science.
Yeah,
I would say that the base worldview of most of my students is secular scientism.
yeah.
It's that the world is made of matter and there is no meaning in life, and it's ultimately about
Ooh,
succeeding or getting the right job or making enough money. And again, that's not what they would say, of course, but I'm
yeah.
just articulating what I think is the base worldview. Others, other of my students do come from very clear religious traditions or families um, that I think are too certain.
Yep.
They're too clear. And the students know darn well. I mean, they're living in a very diverse culture and city and often college where they see people who don't think like them, don't believe like them, don't look like them. They know darn well that these are not universalizable truths. And so they struggle with that and they struggle with that. And so what I try to do in the classroom is just give people words and frameworks for understanding that similarity and that difference. And I
Hmm.
think that's what a good education should be about. It shouldn't be about telling the students what to believe or what to think. It should be about giving them a framework to articulate whatever it is that they think or believe. And because I'm sure I'm wrong about all kinds of things, but so what? I mean,
Hmm.
that's again, that's the nature of the conversation, I think. Um, and that we have it and that we can articulate our differences and our similarities.
Hmm. And do you see that they are open to that
Yeah,
and could actually be the free thinkers as you have them in
yes,
mind?
yeah, some of them.
Yeah.
Um, my experience, my pedagogical experience is that about 10%, I'm just guessing, I'm just throwing out a number there. So 10 out of 100 uh, students are deeply articulate and want to do that. But remember, these are 18 and 19-year-olds.
Yeah.
If I'm in a classroom of adults who are in their 50s or 60s or 70s, it's way higher.
Mm.
It's probably 90% or 95% of the people are very much there. So I do think life and life experience are crucial. Particularly, I mean, I'm a historian of religions, for goodness sake. So I talk about religion and ethics and philosophy a
Hmm.
lot. And people further along the life cycle are much more capable of doing that than people at the beginning of the life cycle.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
But here's the problem here's the problem, or one of the problems. The problem is our culture, by our culture, I actually probably mean global culture here. We give young people basically a moratorium of 4 years. Some people, some individuals, they get 4 years and they're basically free to read and to think and to do whatever it is they want. But we only do that between 18 and 22. We don't do that between 46 and 50 or between
Yeah.
55 and 59. We just don't do that. So, the joke is that education is wasted on the young. Well, it's not wasted, by the way.
Mm.
Um, but a lot of the questions that I'm posing, people don't really ask until they're in their 40s or 50s. But then oh, I was in such and such a conversation and I do have ways of thinking about this and articulating it.
Yeah, yeah.
So
But with the young, where actually the hope should be or is, do you see that most of them grapple with these questions, or would be
no,
are
they
ready for
don't.
change? They don't.
No, no, they don't.
Yeah,
They're convinced by STEM, by science and secularism. They're
yeah,
completely convinced that is reality, and so they don't grapple with it. Um, but again, they eventually, often many of them eventually do, but no, not as certainly not as undergraduates.
hmm,
They think physics has all the answers, or chemistry, or biology, or computer science, or whatever the astronomy, whatever the natural sciences, that's where the truth lies. And this is all just bullshit.
yeah,
This
yeah.
is,
No, I understand that. I was just wondering, even if you think STEM, if you are like environmentally conscious, you could see it as your purpose to create
well,
energy
yeah.
that doesn't cost anything or
Well,
is infinite or like,
yeah, environmentalism is incredibly important to young people. Yes,
yeah,
there is a profound ecological or environmental sensibility. I see that for sure. But religion doesn't get integrated into that a lot, by the way.
yeah,
Um, it's also, our two of our most popular programs in the humanities are environmental humanities and medical humanities.
yeah,
But again, it's a tough call. I mean, like take medical humanities. Well, people have ethical and religious experiences all the time in a modern hospital, but those generally don't get talked about or integrated
mm,
into a medical practice. A medical practice is very much treats the human body as a biological machine, and we you put certain chemicals in it, or you do surgery on it, you remove something. I mean, it's the human being is treated as a biological machine.
mhm.
And the problem with it is that it's very effective. I mean, it's not a problem. It's a promise that that's a really powerful way of treating the human being, but it leaves a lot of the human experience off the table.
Yeah,
And that's where, the medical humanist comes in and says, yeah, but what about this? What about the experience of surgery, or the experience of anesthesia, or what do we do about a coma, for example? Do we medically induce a coma, or do we not? And then we have to ask questions about consciousness and mind, and I mean it just goes down a rabbit hole here.
hmm,
But those are really important issues.
yeah. I want to come back for a moment to these not standard experiences that people have. How do you call them now?
I call them
Supernatural, or
I don't like the word supernatural, by the way, um, because it
yeah.
implies
Therefore, I'm
theism.
asking what is the best word?
I just call them impossible. And by impossible experiences, I mean they're not possible in a scientific framework.
Yes, yeah,
So impossibility again lies in the framework, not in the experience itself. And I think people have these all the time.
yeah. My
And
question was because I can feel that you feel strongly that we should pay more attention to these impossible experiences. Yeah,
they're the most
and
important things that ever happened to people.
yes, what I'm curious is what would change if we would pay more attention to these experiences? Do you think it would be an opening to a different way of relating to life, to other human beings, to the world?
Yes, I do. I think it would
Because
radically alter our view of reality. I think we have to recognize these experiences as coming from us, from coming from consciousness or mind. And once we do that, we have to put mind or consciousness at the very center of reality, and it completely transforms how we think about the real world, and medicine, and ecology, and politics, and morality. It just changes instantly everything.
so I hear you say recognizing consciousness as being primary. would do that. That would be essential, versus the STEM interpretation of consciousness being an epiphenomenon of the
Correct.
brain. Yeah, yeah,
Correct.
yeah, yeah.
That's
No,
what
I
it's
totally agree.
that's what
Yeah,
I
I
call
see.
that I call that the flip,
Yeah.
and you recognize that mind or consciousness is primary, but it actually doesn't change your science or your medicine. It actually makes it
Mm,
better. You
yeah, yeah.
know, you can still do your technology or your architecture or your medicine or your physics or whatever it is, but now you recognize that there's somebody doing the physics or doing the mathematics or doing the architecture. It enriches the experience in a fundamental way. The problem is that again, these flipped experiences need to happen to individuals. People have to generally have to have these experiences to be flipped. And for reasons that I don't think we understand, most people don't have, a lot of people don't have these experiences.
Yeah. Do you see a place there for psychedelics? Are you somebody
Yeah,
that feels like
I do.
psychedelics should be
I
used
do.
more?
I do. I do. And I think the reason psychedelics is pushed back on is precisely because of this. it 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 enters it inserts consciousness or mind directly into the nature of reality, and I think this STEM oriented worldview hates that, and so it literally criminalizes these things, and a lot of psychedelic states are not friendly, by the way, to culture or to politics or to
Yeah, yeah,
religion.
yeah,
They're
exactly.
this, they're not. And so, again, it's easy to criminalize. We literally make these things illegal because we don't like what they're doing to the worldview that's in place.
But there seems to be an opening, no? Is that
Oh
not
yeah,
not
no,
happening
there's
in the
clearly,
US? Or yeah,
yeah, yeah. No, there's clearly an
like
opening. Psychedelic studies is something that is definitely entering the university. Um, in terms of the states now, I mean, there's two issues that I think are I call them hooks or gateway drugs is another one of fiction I use. One is the UFO, the other is psychedelics. And those are the two mechanisms that draw people in to these fields. And I'm not a fan of the literalisms that surround those two subjects or the mythologies, as it were. But I am a fan of the way they draw people into the conversation. I think it's
and why the UFOs? I can totally follow you with the psychedelics, but why the UFOs?
they're in
Because
Congress.
it's out of our
No,
normal
no,
thinking
it's
frame.
the military encounters them all the time, and they're in Congress. They're literally hearings. They're literally laws passed to. I mean, it's there are movies, there are television programs. It's about the UFO or the UAP as they call it now. So it's people talking about the things I want them to talk about. But of
Hmm.
course, what happens is they talk about it in a mythology or in a kind of literalism I I think is predictable but problematic.
Hmm.
So psychedelics are very much and by the way, the psychedelic trip is very much related to the UFO experience. I think they're really related, actually.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and people don't want to hear that, but I'm like, yeah, it's kind of true. It's not kind of true. It actually is true.
It's interesting. It's fascinating for me. When I was a teenager, between 16 and 20, I read all the Eric von Däniken books. He was one of the first
Yeah.
UFO guys, and I was totally in it. And today I'm more kind of, yeah, show it to me. I'm not so sure. That doesn't mean I know anything about it, but it's very interesting how this has changed from my
Well,
teenage years to now.
the ancient aliens Daniken thing is just
Yeah,
one
yeah, yeah.
strand in that conversation, one interpretation. I'm not a fan of what we call the ETH, the extraterrestrial hypothesis. I think it's not true.
Mm,
And I think the phenomenon is much more complicated than the ETH. Certainly than Daniken thought. So you can inhabit. What I like about that topic, though, is people have these experiences.
Hmm.
I mean, we can say all we want about, oh, I don't, I don't read so and so, or I don't like so and so, or I read.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
what? So what? People still have these experiences. Pilots see these things. These appear on radar. This this is this is part of our reality, whether
yeah,
we recognize it or not. And it's a hook. It gets people into these experiences. And then once you start talking about things in the sky, you start also talking about out of body experiences and the soul. And, it just goes on and
yeah,
on like this. And so for me, I love that because it messes things up. And I'm attracted to UFOs and psilocybin and DMT and all these things, not because we understand what's going on, but precisely because we don't.
yeah,
And I'm like, okay, let's talk about it. Let's now we can do
yeah,
it. Now we can do it.
yeah, yeah, that makes sense.
And again, I don't have any certainty. It's not
Yeah,
like
yeah,
I'm giving you an answer about what this is or anything. It's just can't we address these? When I talk to people who've experienced psilocybin or DMT or an abduction encounter, or something, it's the most important thing that ever happened to them.
yeah, yeah,
These are not
exactly.
these are not tangential. This is
No,
not this is not some kind of, it's not like me drinking coffee in the morning, It's like, no, this is like, this happened in 1987 in March 2nd. I mean, they'll give you the date and the time. And I mean,
yeah, yeah,
this is like,
no, it's life
this is
changing.
it. This is life
Yeah,
changing.
yeah,
And so I'm like, okay, let's do it.
yeah, interesting. Great. Is there anything else we want to cover, or are we good?
I, I mean, come on. We just talked about psychedelics and UFOs. I mean, I think we're probably good.
Yeah,
I
very good.
mean, whereas in we're it's an open box now.
Yeah, no, it's totally an open box. And what I love is that every box that I open with these conversations is different. So
Yeah.
it's very fascinating.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Jeffy.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you for having me.